James Whitcomb Riley, known as the Hoosier poet, lived from 1849 to 1916. His poems tend to be humorous or sentimental, and many of them are aimed at children. Of the approximately 1,000 poems Riley wrote, the majority are in dialect, including the one I'm about to recite. His more famous works also include Little Orphaned Annie and The Raggedy Man. He gradually rose to prominence during the 1880s through his poetry reading tours, achieving an uncommon level of fame during his lifetime. He was honored with annual Riley Day celebrations around the U.S., was regularly called on to perform readings at national civic events. Riley's chief legacy was his influence in fostering the creation of a Midwestern cultural identity and his contributions to the golden age of Indiana literature. Yes, there was one. With other writers of this era, he helped create a caricature, of Midwesterners, and formed a literary community that produced works rivaling the Eastern establishment. There are many memorials dedicated to him, and the Riley Hospital for Children in Indianapolis is named for him. My own father used to acknowledge the advent of cold weather by saying, "Frost is on the pumpkin." And the phrase comes from the following poem. By the way, fodder is food for livestock. A shock, as I found out, is a tied bundle of 12 sheaves of corn or other grain. And this is fairly unusual, but if you'd like to Google the poem right now, you can read it silently along with me. There's a lot of dialect in this poem, and reading it as you hear it may help a bit. Or it may be a useless distraction, who can say? But that's why it isn't on the screens. When the frost is on the pumpkin. When the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock, and you hear the kyuk and gobble of the strutting turkey cock, and the clacking of the guineas, and the clucking of the hens, and the rooster's hallelujah as he tiptoes on the fence. Oh, it's then's the time a feller is a-feelin' at his best, with the risin' sun to greet him from a night of peaceful rest. As he leaves the house bareheaded and goes out to feed the stock, when the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock. They's something kind of hearty-like about the atmosphere when the heat of summer's over and the cool in fall is here. Of course, we miss the flowers and the blossoms on the trees and the mumble of the hummingbirds and the buzzing of the bees, but the air so appetizing and the landscape through the haze of a crisp and sunny morning of the early autumn days is a picture that no painter has the coloring to mock when the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock. The husky, rusty rustle of the tassels of the corn and the rasping of the tangled leaves is golden as the morn. The stubble in the furrows, kind of lonesome-like, but still a-preachin' sermons to us of the barns they growed to fill. The straw stack in the medder and the reaper in the shed, the hosses in their stalls below, the clover overhead. Oh, it sets my heart a-clickin' like the tickin' of a clock when the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock. Then your apples all is gathered, and the ones a feller keeps is poured around the cellar floor in red and yeller heaps, and your cider makin's over, and your women folk is through with their mince and apple butter and their sauce and sausage too. I don't know how to tell it, but if such a thing could be, as the angels wantin' boardin', and they'd call around on me, I'd want to accommodate them, all the whole endurin' flock, when the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to read the Woodcutter's Song. It's by Robin Williamson, and it's about 100 years old, and there are actually many different versions of the song. This particular arrangement is by Pint, or Pinto, Pint, and Dale. Okay. Oak logs will warm you well that are old and dry. Logs of pine will sweetly smell, but the sparks will fly. Birch logs will burn too fast, and chestnuts scarce at all, sir. And hawthorn logs are known to last that are cut down in the fall, sir. Holly logs will burn like wax. You can burn them green. Elm logs burn like smoldering flax, with no flames to be seen. Beech logs for winter time, yew logs as well, sir. Green adder logs, it's a crime for any man to sell, sir. Pear logs and apple logs, they will scent your room. Cherry logs across the dogs smell like flowers in bloom. But ash logs, smooth and gray, buy them green or old, sir, and buy up all that come your way, for they're worth their weight in gold, sir. Surely you will find there's none compares with the hardwood logs that are cut in the winter time.
Thank you, Karen. I've always been amazed at how people can look at the grain of wood furniture and immediately tell what kind of tree it was made from. The color is irrelevant, since wood stone can make one wood the color of another. The Woodcutter's Song is a favorite of mine because someone obviously felt so strongly about the differences between various types of wood that they made a reference catalog, as it were, in rhyme of how they burn as firewood. That is how important it was to have enough wood for the cold season in store. It is indeed a psychological boost to look out the window at the woodpile and feel ready for winter. Lynn McDonald suggested the title of this service just to celebrate autumn. And once I read the poem itself, I started thinking about how happy the narrator is to look around and see that the fodder's in the shock, the livestock will be fed over the winter, the grain, apples, and meat have all been harvested, and the air smells great. Life is good, and even if the angels came to visit, the narrator is ready to invite them all in. And in our story for all ages, the snowshoe hare does not even notice the changes her own body is making to prepare for what's ahead. But once the changes are there, she too feels the joy that Riley talks about and leaps into the air for the sheer fun of it. Now, obviously, there are fewer outward signs for urban dwellers that things have been made ready for colder weather and the accompanying holidays. But the scent of autumn slowly turning to winter is distinctive, and I make a point of noticing it and appreciating it whenever I can. It's one of those things about nature that helps the body and mind to combat the blues and stave off depression. The older and crankier I get, the more every little bit helps. I'm especially pleased that Bird painted these acorns for Joys and Concerns. I was thinking about doing the same thing with pine cones for the fall, so she beat me to it. Well done, Bird. The acorns are very nice, and they also remind me of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who used the symbolism of acorns in their peace campaigns. Now, let me tell you about the acorns, because I think it's a very sweet story about an utterly awful time for the country and the world. Around 1969, the Vietnam War was raging, and everyone and their dog was protesting the war. John and Yoko, those wacky conceptual artists, were trying to find original ways to show support for peace talks. And the first thing they did was to ask for permission to plant 2 acorns in the gardens of St. Michael's Cathedral in the city of Coventry, placing a bench over them so that people could sit on the bench, imagine the acorns growing into oak trees, and presumably think about peace. Okay, we'll leave aside the impracticality of this. And of course, I can't leave aside the impracticality of this. Even if one acorn grew, it would hit the bench. Then it would have to be moved. Now, if both grew, they would crowd each other because oaks are known for growing to be, well, mighty. And so clearly the growing of an actual oak tree or 2 was not the end goal. The goal was just to have a place where people could think about small actions leading to something great. But even this had its problems. At the time, John and Yoko were not yet married to each other. The cathedral officials took a dim view of their divorces from earlier partners. So there was a great outcry and protest over those acorns being planted on cathedral grounds by such sinful people. The acorns were planted over said protests anyway. Unfortunately, very soon after, someone broke into the grounds of the cathedral, dug up, and stole the acorns. I cannot imagine what would make someone do something like this. They were acorns, for crying out loud. They were not gold bars, they were not Bitcoin. How could anyone think it was worth the effort? I could not tell you. Eventually the acorns were replaced, John and Yoko got married, came up with a few more ideas. Grow your hair for peace. Stay in bed for peace. You have to admit these are pretty darn peaceful ways of promoting peace. I'm not making it up. Google if you are too young to remember the news coverage. Then they went back to those pesky acorns. They hit on the idea of sending acorns to as many world leaders as possible, with a letter attached advising them to plant said acorns to promote peace. Quote, "Enclosed in this package, we are sending you 2 living sculptures, which are acorns, in the hope that you will plant them in your garden and grow 2 oak trees for world peace. Yours with love, John and Yoko Ono Lennon." On the 2nd of May, 2009, 40 years after that original mailing, Yoko sent 123 acorn peace boxes to world leaders and heads of state, including President Obama, hoping they again would plant them and again grow 2 oak trees for world peace. Now, both times, for the most part, the world leaders were tickled. Many of them did indeed promise to plant the acorns. Some of the responses John and Yoko received were very gracious, especially if those countries were not actually at war at the time. Because sometimes it's just nice to get a letter and a small gift that isn't yelling at you. Just asking politely for you to do something very small, probably pointless, as a symbol of something big. And to take some time to think about how great it would be to have peace in the world. Now, what's amazing and adorable to me about the story is how honored the city of Coventry is to this day that they were part of this admittedly unsuccessful campaign. In 2005, on the 25th anniversary of John's death, Yoko received a very welcoming reception at the cathedral upon the launch of Coventry Peace Month. An acorn was sent to every school in Coventry for children to plant and grow for peace. Yoko visited several schools in the city to plant more trees on their grounds. Her visit healed the 40-year rift with Coventry Cathedral. Now, obviously, we still do not have peace in this world. But 35 years after the original acorns were planted, children were still told about the value of doing something small to make people aware of something big. like the snowshoe hare, coming back to the more immediate environs, I have been haunted by the vaguely looming specter of winter. Will I remember to bake all the service auction stuff I told people that I would? I just came back from my brother-in-law's funeral a few weeks ago and saw how much cleaning out my sister has done, and I started feeling my age and thinking, am I finally going to clean out the house so that when I'm gone, everyone else doesn't have to do it for me? Will I lose enough weight for the insurance health screening next month? And the most frightening for me, what is going to happen in this building on Christmas Day and New Year's Day? You'll notice in the order of service insert and the flyer that's on the table outside, Christmas and New Year's Day are both Sundays. As the chair of the Worship Arts Committee, it falls on me and my committee to have something in place for those 2 days, which are historically vacation days for the minister, and therefore not so well attended. Reverend Chip Roush suggested resurrecting the pancake breakfast on New Year's Day. Now, understandably, since it's a lot of work for volunteers, the events and social committees washed their hands of such events many years ago, especially now since those on Zoom can't really take part, right? So various choices are in the air. Informal games, a quick and dirty do-it-yourself service for Christmas Day. At least one person has suggested just close the church on December 25th. It has been done before. Or read How the Grinch Stole Christmas, or some other appropriate story. By the way, I have been told Christmas Carol is way too dang long, don't even think about it. I agree. Singing Christmas carols. And what about that pancake breakfast on New Year's Day? Who will coordinate it? Now, Jim Curley, bless his soul, used to be the god of the pancake breakfasts many years ago. He has hinted that he might help again. Who's with him? What can we all bring to the table, metaphorically or literally? I am not exaggerating when I say I have lost sleep over this. When I'm wide awake and thinking clearly, I realize no one is going to die over the wrong decision. Many people in this church have opinions. I will not be making this decision by myself. But whether this church is open and welcoming on that one Sunday that someone really needs us is important. It's a little thing, but it may change someone's life. Probably not, but it may. I have been in places where someone was honest enough to tell a room full of people that for some personal, vital reason, they just needed to be with other people. Hearing something like that moves you, and unfortunately can also make you lose sleep. This is the reason that after the offering, which will include an awesome song, I want to hear from you via Zoom or in this room. Talk to us, and yes, come up here. We're not going to pass the mic around because then the people on Zoom cannot see you. Talk to us about the winter to come. First, most important for my selfish and self-centered personal mental health, what are people wanting to do on Christmas morning and New Year's Day? And second, for you, what plans do you have for your coming winter? What will you do to get comfortable? To get a seat for the parade, as it were, to help others, or just to survive physically and emotionally? What have you already done? What have you bought? What have you gathered, gotten rid of? What small things can we all do to prevent catastrophe, or ideally, to bring about something wonderful? think about that. And we will now have the offering. Oh, just chill, they haven't even started singing yet. Jeez. The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. It is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. The offering will, in a few